are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
But, this being Popcorn Theology, it's probably time to dive into some more of the Christmas films. And one thing that these do tend to get into a little bit is faith, right? And so, speaking of Santa Claus, so many of the Christmas movies are centered around, whether or not the characters believe in Santa Claus, whether they've outgrown that, and whether that belief has any, impact on their lives. And sometimes it's not belief in Santa, it's just general belief in the season. Some sort of vague sanitized notion of belief, and it's typically misguided, but still it brings up the topic of faith on an annual basis with these films. And so I'm curious if there's any that come to mind that really point us back to that faith in Christ and can be a redeeming talking point. Any that stand out to you?
Christmas movies that point us back to that?
Yeah.
Well, we've already mentioned Elf, and I know there was an episode on it. But Elf, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you watch that for 25 days straight, 24/7, you're going to see it. You have a son dropped into the world with good news to share. And he's the only one that can save his people. Like that's Buddy the Elf's story. You have the guiding spirit, which is Santa Claus, and you even have him redeeming families. Like you drop into that story of his brother is at war almost with his dad for his dad's attention, but his dad doesn't care. But then Buddy comes in and redeems that entire family to the point where you got that beautiful scene at the end. They're all together singing Christmas carols and enjoying one another. Man, that's the good news of the gospel. Jesus has come for us to save us, to redeem us, to take where there was conflict because of sin and essentially bring peace. He is the Prince of Peace, as he's described in Isaiah 9. So definitely Elf, if you have the eyes to see it. Yeah. I mean, you have it mentioned already in Christmas Carol, and I would agree with that too. The entirety of the Christmas Carol is a point. So I'll let you talk about the Christmas Carol. One of the reasons I love Iron Man 3 as much as I do is because it is just a spoof of the Christmas Carol, but in the MCU, which I think is beautiful. I don't know. I enjoy the Hallmark Christmas movies.
Oh boy.
They're cheesy, okay. But I don't know. And I was going to ask you this. What films do you have to watch in order for you to say, yep, it's the Christmas season? Because for my wife and I, it's always the Hallmark movies. We're going to find, or you go on Netflix, like we're going to find whatever cheesy Christmas movie we can find. And we like to put that on and just sit and watch it. There was Netflix had a show called Mary, I think it was Mary freaking whatever or something like that, which the title doesn't sound great, but it had Dennis Quaid in it, and it was and Ashley Tisdale was in it as well, and it was like a Christmas sitcom show, and it only had one season, which is a shame, but that was a fun show to watch because it was families interacting with one another during the holiday, and they had all these quirky things that they were going through, but then ultimately coming together at the end of it. And I think that you see that in a lot of the Hallmark movies. There's conflict, there's strife, there's turmoil, but then there's one event that happens that brings everyone together. And that's what we celebrate at Christmas. There's conflict, there's strife, there's turmoil. We are at war against our God, and yet one event, the coming of Jesus, will ultimately lead to the ultimate victory, which is Jesus at the cross, paying the price for our sins and resurrecting. And I think that's your whole arching theme for a Christmas movie is the strife, turmoil, and everything comes together at the end where everything is peaceful again. And so David, you have Christmas Carol. Why do you have Christmas Carol listed?
I was going to say, So is there a movie that I need to watch? Without which it's not Christmas.
Yep.
I think I already mentioned Elf and Santa Claus. Those are the two big ones, but also A Christmas Story, right? So the And for that one, it's just pure nostalgia. It's nostalgia of an 80s movie, of a 50s story. And it's just endlessly quotable. And so that's kind of become a more recent favorite in terms of, traditional stories. And it's so funny. I've never, of all the times I've heard discussion of Hallmark movies, I don't think I've ever heard the words conflict, strife, and turmoil used to describe it, because usually the point of conflict is such a minor thing.
It really
compared
is.
to grand stories. I'm not a big fan of Hallmark movies, but all that said, there is something of a formula and to all Christmas stories, not just to those. And so A Christmas Carol, and to be honest, A Christmas Carol is not my even favorite. It's not even the one that I have to watch in order to have it feel like the season. But this Charles Dickens story that has been rendered so many times, and let us know in the comments section what your favorite Christmas Carol version is. But the more I thought about the themes that we're about to get into of Christmas stories, the more I realized that Christmas Carol is not just a Christmas story or Christmas film, as it's rendered. It's the godfather of all of them.
It is, yeah.
Not just because it predates them, but because all of the themes that these other films do, Christmas Carol does them better.
Yes.
And explores them more deeply and more fully. And I was really kind of surprised to realize that, because it's a story that I was familiar with, but that I never, I'm not exactly big into Charles Dickens, but we're dealing with a story here that touches on every theme that we're about to discuss and really nails it and really focuses again in on that heart change. Because to me, that's the main underlying theme of Christmas, right? A thrill of hope, a weary world rejoices, right? So there's weariness, there's brokenness, and there is a pointing back to something. And the fact that Christmas takes place in the winter, is really tied to this cycle of death, burial, resurrection. Even in cultures that don't honor Christ, there's this notion of that season pointing at times to pagan gods. It points to different things, but that's all the general revelation of God's world pointing back to Christ that we learn about through that special revelation. And so there's typically in a Christmas story, there's elements of faith and belief, usually in Santa or the Christmas spirit or some secularly acceptable, version. But that's easily redeemable to point towards Christ. There's also a heart change that occurs. Any good Christmas story, there's a Scrooge, right? And that Scrooge is going to have a change of heart, a change not just in themselves, but that results in a change in their behavior and in their relationships with others, from family to the community as a whole. And again, this brings us so close to the gospel, right? It brings us so close. And so, Christmas Carol is probably the most notable of those. But are there any other heart change movies that come to mind? You mentioned Iron Man 3, which is starting to grow on me. But it's also one reason. It's also one reason I struggle with Die Hard being a Christmas movie, because I'm sure James could tell me all the reasons I'm wrong about this, but to my mind, John McClane doesn't undergo a tremendous amount of change of heart or mind during that film, compared to some of the others that we see. But anyway,
The Grinch Who Stole Christmas is a perfect one.
Ooh, good one.
The version I love, my wife and I love to watch it, is the Jim Carrey one again. He's just killing it with Christmas movies. I'll tell you. You have a character who has been, they get that live action one gets more into the Grinch's backstory than any other renditions, right? So you have a character who's been hurt by Christmas, and not by Christmas, but he blames the Christmas season on his hurt and is rejected. And so then he goes off to live in isolation, which the Proverbs tell us is seeking after our own destruction. And that just is a downward spiral for that guy. He goes from someone who wants to celebrate, and of course he loves that little Who, I don't remember her name, Martha May Who, right?
Cindy Lou Who.
Well, it's the one that he loved in his backstory. Yeah, Martha May Who.
Yeah,
and then he loves her, and he tries to give her a gift, and everyone makes fun of him, and he leaves. And it takes a childlike wonder, childlike faith with Cindy Lou Who to help him to see Christmas is actually great. Like, and of course you get the heart change there. Quite literally, his heart grows 3 sizes larger. And that's another one. You mentioned the Christmas Story. The Grinch is another one I quoted all year around, where loathe, or hate, loathe entirely. I mean, there's a lot in that, but the themes in that movie are the same, right? You have conflict, you have turmoil. Cindy Lou Who's questioning, why do we even celebrate Christmas? So she needs reminded. Everyone else is kind of blinded by the commercialization that has become Christmas. You have a big cataclysm take place. All the Christmas gifts are taken. Grinch thinks he's destroyed Christmas, but then he hears all of the Who's are still singing and celebrating Christmas. And so there must be something more to this Christmas than just the gifts. And it took the Grinch taking everything for all the Who's to recognize that. And then it takes Cindy Lou Who almost dying for him to recognize that. Yeah, so that's one for me. I mean, that's one we watch every single year. And that's one where it's like, this really, really encompasses the Christmas story that we celebrate with the incarnation of Christ.
Wow. That's awesome. If you redeeming how the Grinch stole Christmas, that's what we're all about here. That kind of thing. Oh, great one. Yeah. The heart change. I mean, literally the heart grew 3 sizes that day.
That's
right?
it. Yeah.
And broke that little measuring device.
Yep.
Yeah. Fantastic. And so these heart changes, I really tried to rack my brain, and this is a great genre to do this with, because Christmas is tied to films 10,000 times more than any other holiday, right? You can point to maybe 1 or 2 movies for the 4th of July or Thanksgiving or Easter or whatever, Memorial Day, a handful of films for all of the other holidays combined. And Christmas is just inundated with them. It just tied to story. And there's something beautiful to that. And one of the things that we see as far as the recurring themes, right? And so what do all of these Christmas films have in common, or at least the vast majority of them? There's, again, a change in belief, a change in heart, and a change in behavior. And so one of the sort of outworkings of that is the shift from materialism to generosity, right? So typically there may be a character who's focused on what they can gain for themselves and the sort of commercialized nature of the holiday. And then they're eventually learning, as Christ said, that it is better to give than to receive. And so and sometimes they even quote that, right? Sometimes they even quote that passage of scripture. And so the Christmas Carol does it best, but the Santa Claus is another pretty good example of that. You mentioned Grinch, the Netflix film Klaus.
But
that
was a good one.
Yeah. And another good feature is not just a shift from materialism to generosity, but then from being a humbug, if you will, a Scrooge, to a spirit of joy, all right, and to this Christmas spirit. And again, Scrooge does it best, but we also see it with Elf. The fact that they chose James Caan, like, to me, he might be funnier than Will Ferrell in the movie, because he's just, he's just so brutally cynical about everything. And but then he undergoes this change of heart. By the end, he's playing piano with Zooey Deschanel, and it's just a beautiful
and he as an actor even talked about how he didn't think Will Ferrell was funny at all. And he has
that
a statement
on screen.
He has a statement where he's like, I just didn't get it. But then apparently he watched the film and now he's all on board. But while he was making the film, he's like, I don't get it. I don't think Will's funny. I don't get it. And that, it is obvious when you watch him.
Yeah. So certain movies and shows that when you watch, the behind, or, if you watch the behind the scenes, you can tell the actors are just having a great time. They're loving it, and they're having trouble keeping a straight face. You do not get that vibe with Elf, right? Nope. I don't. I watch it and I'm like, man, could you imagine, like, they say cut and then Will Ferrell's just like, go back to my trailer, like, just so uncomfortable. That's how I imagine it was. But again, he's such a legend that and I'm sure he managed it just fine. I have a scene where I have to tickle James Caan, and get drop kicked by Peter Dinklage. Beautiful movie. Anyway, but switching even from a humbug to having joy, a very minor example of this is in A Christmas Story, right? This movie, I think, harnesses nostalgia more than most things. Not a tremendously deep story. It's about a kid who wants a BB gun, but his dad is just this foul-mouthed, brutal humbug of a man who by the end is celebrating Christmas with his family in a joyful way. And so there's some restoration there, which brings me to the next point, right? And so if we've got materialism to generosity, humbug to joy, and then there's this restoration of the family. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes there's a character trying to get home in time for Christmas, or a broken set of relationships. I'm curious if there are any that come to mind for you, or that really stand out as a picture of healing a family. Elf has this as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, in addition to
that, Christmas with the Cranks.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah. I mean, and you're even saying the material generosity, right? They want to do away with Christmas. That's quite literally their plot. Like, we're going to do away with Christmas. We're going on a cruise. Tim Allen's character is the one that's the Scrooge. We don't owe anyone. We can do this, right? Mm-hmm. And it's all because their daughter is going to be away for Christmas. So he refuses to put up Christmas tree, Christmas lights. Their neighborhood's doing Christmas stuff. And he's like, we're not doing it. We're not going to be a part of it. They don't donate to the local fire department like they normally do. So you got the humbug there. But then the restoration of the family comes when they find out, oh, she's coming back home. And you have what's really beautiful is, a community coming around them when they realize she's coming back home. This whole community comes together to make this annual Christmas party happen. And he quickly recognizes, he gets humbled very quickly and recognizes, oh, no, Christmas is more than just giving gifts. It's about the family. It's about what we celebrate with one another. So Christmas Cranks 100% is one of those. Or you think of, I mentioned it to you last night. I think I called it Turbo Man, but it was Jingle All the Way.
Such a good one. Yes.
My wife had never seen that before. And when I found out, I said, we're sitting down and watching this.
It's so interesting. Yeah.
We did. We sat down and watched it. She laughed. She thought it was hilarious. It's funny to see Arnold Schwarzenegger in a heartwarming movie like that.
Don't forget, you're my number one customer. Yeah.
You're my number one customer. Yeah. But it's one of those movies, right? He's distant from his family. He's never home. That seems to be a theme in a lot of the Christmas movies too, right?
Yeah.
And so he's essentially failing as a father, and he doesn't show up for this karate belt testing that his son has, and his son's really upset about it. So then he makes a promise. Well, I'm going to get you what you want for Christmas. And it's this like highly sought after action figure of Turbo Man. And the whole plot ends up going in a completely ridiculous way at the end, where he becomes Turbo Man. It's like the greatest gift ever is you have your father back, but he's also Turbo Man. Check that out. But there's a restoration of the family, even to the point of, in the movie, you have the neighbor. I don't remember his name. But the neighbor's
hitting on the wife,
hitting on his wife the whole time. And it's sparking up jealousy, and it's sparking up a reminder of, no, she's my wife. I should be fighting for her. Like I need to start putting away these worldly things and recognize what I have right in front of me. And so even that is like, you've got some turmoil with son and father, and husband and wife, and you've got a snake that's trying to sneak its way into the garden. So he has to then no longer be the passive man, but be the present protector to protect her from the neighbor. And it's a beautiful movie, because then at the end, it's like everyone's celebrating this huge parade, and dad's finally back with the family. So you've got that restoration going on there. Those are two awesome that came to mind.
That's a really great one. Yeah. I think another, kind of unsuspecting Christmas movie for heart change is Christmas Vacation, right? This is an easy one to think of as an outlandish, ridiculous story, complete with one of the best characters in film, Cousin Eddie. Just wonderful. And, and of course, Chevy Chase just losing his absolute mind, and his family being dysfunctional in every way. But I think that points to another recurring theme that we see in Christmas films, which is this restoration of family. And actually, just as a quick, pointing back to Andrew's book, It's Beginning to Look a Lot Like Christmas. He points to the genealogies, which Jan mentioned earlier, as, highlighting that Jesus had some baggage in his past, right? Yeah. He was descended from Bathsheba and Rahab and Tamar, and we're seeing other dark moments in the history of his family, and characters that could make him embarrassed the way that Chevy Chase's family could make him embarrassed, but that he is highlighting, that those get highlighted, right? Not swept under the rug, right? They're not doing the thing that often happens with, ancient leaders or historical figures where it gets whitewashed, it gets cleansed. Instead, what we're seeing is this, this pointing out that Christ descended into a weary world, into a broken world, and then was able to bring a new and glorious morning to that. And so even a kind of goofy movie like Christmas Vacation sees a restoration of those relationships, even, being more appreciated at work with his boss, and then, with his cousin. And again, it's all shrouded under some hilarious comedy. But we see that there. Another interesting one, Home Alone. To be honest, it's not my favorite Christmas movie. I'm not a huge fan of the Home Alone films. They're okay. But I caught the end just maybe a week ago. And the entire subplot with the old man in the neighborhood, oh my gosh, it's that beautiful. Really does it. I mean, the fact that he hasn't spoken to his son in years, he's afraid to reinitiate that relationship. And Kevin helps him to see, you should really value this, because he's missing his family in that moment because they left him. I mean, and even the whole setup to the story, right? I wish my family would disappear. Yep. And he gets his wish, right? Twice. He gets his wish. And then he discovers how much he needs them, how much they need him. And there's beauty in that need that they have for each other. And so family relationships are restored. Yeah, those I think are certainly the big ones. And then, another thing that we see in addition to that is expanded beyond just the family to the wider community. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, Christmas Carol does it best. Oh, and speaking of the family thing, remember Scrooge had a nephew, right? We think of his employee, which is a key thing in this next theme. But his relationship with his nephew, Donald Duck, is restored, or whatever the character's name actually is. Gets restored there as well.
Cratchit, Bob Cratchit.
Cratchit's the employee. I forget the nephew's name.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I don't know. I forget the name.
I don't remember his name either. Yep.
Anyway, yeah, we can look it up. But again, that's why I said Donald Duck. So in my version, in my head, Scrooge is a duck. But anyway, so the theme of serving your community, I think that the best rendition of that is It's a Wonderful Life. This is a movie that I think arguably could be considered not a Christmas movie because it's very long. Most of it does not take place centered around Christmas, but the climax does. It also points to another theme that we see in Christmas movies. There's often angels in disguise. We see that in The Preacher's Wife as well. They're ghosts in A Christmas Carol, not angels, but we see transcendent beings from another realm, if you will. And It's a Wonderful Life explores the interaction that oh goodness, I forget his first name, Bailey, has with his community. In his case, unlike Home Alone, he doesn't wish that they had never, that his family would disappear. He wishes that he had never been born because times are so dark and so broken. And he gets his wish, right? He gets to see what that looks like for him to never have existed, and the hole that is left in his community and his family as a result of him never being part of that, and all of the outworkings of that. I think it's just a really beautiful aspect of what makes that one a Christmas story, right? He has a change of heart, results in a change in his behavior. Although in his case, it's arguably he's already a virtuous man, but he loses sight of the impact of his life on others. And so that's another, I think, really, really good example of this overall theme. And so just to recap, right? Not to make this a lesson, but just to recap a little bit, what we see in Christmas movies is a belief in something, right? It should be belief in Christ if we properly redeem that, leading to a change in heart, a change in behavior, relationship with family, a change in generosity towards more joy, and then towards serving of community. And I mean, once again, if this is not pointing us to the truth of the gospel, I don't know what is, right? Because even these even the traditions that we have, even the myths, right? The fact that Santa Claus is mythologized and made to be more than he is, but Christ doesn't need to be mythologized. He was a miracle worker, is a miracle worker. He sits at the right hand of God on high and intercedes for us. He's not just giving gifts once a year that will break and need new batteries. He's giving us eternal life to those who accept him. And, this is all pointing to the gospel. I mean, and it's a fantastic way to share it with your neighbors and loved ones. So just want to encourage everyone to take advantage of this opportunity, right? Because this is one of the few times of the year that people are willing to open their minds and their hearts to something beyond themselves and to recognizing that there's a need for change. And so, this has been a great discussion. Jam, any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
Iron Man 3 is a Christmas movie.
Hashtag a Christmas movie. Yeah. A Christmas story. All we need is for Iron Man to get his mouth washed out with soap. You know what I mean? Fantastic. So everyone let us know in the comments what your favorite Christmas films are, your favorite Christmas carols, traditions, favorite renditions of Christmas Carol, and all of the other ones that get multiple versions, the Grinch and whatnot. And also pick up a copy of Andrew Wilson's book. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. It's an excellent exploration. And, if you're considering giving stuff out to friends and neighbors, this is a non-intimidating read for people that maybe haven't read a book since high school, which is an overwhelming majority of Americans. Pick up copies of that and give them out to people. And don't forget, as a quick plug, one last time, if you give us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes, screenshot that, send it to feedback@popcorntheology.com. Then you'll get 2 free stickers, gifts from us to you, but also gifts from you to someone else. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this series. Jam, thanks for joining for this. Andrew, thank you for intending to join. We really tried.
We appreciate you, buddy.
Yes, we do. And we're looking forward to another discussion another time. And so just want to wish everyone who has joined us for this and everyone else a very Merry Christmas from all of us here at Popcorn Theology. And in the meantime, keep engaging media from a godly worldview. And remember, you are not a mindless consumer.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of our In the Lobby series. To watch future episodes, click the link in the description to support us on Patreon and become a patron saint. Subscribe on YouTube for more content, follow and interact on social media to share with others, and remember, you are not a mindless consumer.